So the name of this webinar is CCRS at a Distance. Seriously, because this is hard work. We know you're doing the hard work. Thank you for doing it. We do want to share what we hope are some tools to make it easier. So that's why we're here today. And I mentioned I'm Patsy. I direct Atlas, and also joining me are Kristine and Lindsey, who are at the top of the screen here. And I'll let them come on camera briefly and say hello. There they are.
Hello. I'm like, hi.
Hi. By the way, Patsy, it's actually CCRS at a Distance. Seriously?
Yeah, you do it better.
A little
for
more
sure.
inflection.
A little more inflection. I apologize. I was never in theater, so it's hard for me, where I know you were. Also on our CCRS lead team is Astrid Leiden, who's not joining us this afternoon, but of course with us in spirit as we do the CCRS work ever since 2014 when we started implementing the standards in Minnesota. So thank you so much for joining us for these objectives today. We are going to do a little playing. We're going to play with 2 online tools that you can use for your online classrooms for multiple subjects, ELA and math. I neglected to mention Kristine is our English language arts lead, and our math and numeracy lead is Lindsey. So you have all sides of it today. And we hope you'll be able to make some connections between these online learning tools and CCRS standards-based instruction. And we hope that by the end of our time today, you'll identify 1 or more tools that you could put to use. And of course, recognize the importance of some routines that we'll be introducing for teaching and learning. So this is complex work, but these tools will hopefully make it easier for you. So the agenda this afternoon is to introduce these 2 tools for formative assessment, Mentimeter and Desmos. We're going to have some time in breakout groups, so a heads up, at some point we are going to ask you to turn on your cameras and mics in the breakout rooms, not now, in order to connect with your colleagues. We don't get to do that very much lately, so here's an opportunity. Then we'll come back, we'll introduce Edpuzzle, which can be used for both ELA and math, and then also reflect in some breakout groups, and we'll do a little debrief before we wrap up for the day. I'll turn it over to Kristine. Go ahead.
Thank you. And one of the things that we were careful to do is I've been to many workshops in the last 6 months about online tools. And a lot of them were like, this would be great for this. This would be great for this. I can speak for my part. I actually am putting up very concrete examples of how you can use these tools. So it isn't just, it's great for formative assessment, but this is what it could look like as formative assessment. So lots of concreteness, which is something I think we all would like to see. Right now, it's about engagement and participation, which is true all the time of what we do. But I'm finding that with teaching my Zoom classes, it's even more about engagement and participation. Really getting students, I can't see student faces a lot of the times. I have students who like to be quiet on Zoom. I want to make sure I'm getting everybody at some points to participate. So, and yes, it is about the standards, which we will be showing some direct connections to. So remote instruction or not, we must align our instruction to the standards as best we can. Engagement helps create that motivation and persistence for students. And online tools allow all students to participate, not only the students who are on camera or who feel comfortable sharing their answers. So for example, when I do some formative assessment on Mentimeter, I get feedback from all the students. And at least I know that I'm getting a nice picture of the group and how they are feeling about where they are with learning targets. Students need to feel they're making progress. And we need information to continue to serve them effectively, all the ways we can get information. Again, I guess I never really thought about how much information I get just being face-to-face with students, that ability to be able to walk around and look over their shoulders, for example. And tools help with routines. I've built some pretty good routines that my students are getting very used to with some of these tools. So, interactive tools for formative assessments. Mentimeter is one that you might be maybe a little more familiar with. It's being used on a lot of webinars. You may or may not have used it with students. I'm going to show you exactly how I do this. And I've done a Mentimeter with my students as recently as about an hour and a half ago, where we did a GED practice question. So I'm going to talk a little bit about it. Please put any questions that you have or comments in the chat box. If you've used Mentimeter and there's another way that I'm not showing that you would really like to share, please feel free to chat that out in the box. So Mentimeter, and all these tools are free. This is an interactive presentation tool. And the great thing about it is you get real-time data and you can actually share your screen. This is a great tool. You can use it face-to-face as well and put it up on a smartboard, for example. And students get to see how the class is responding to whatever they're responding to. And it engages all students during a class. My students, we're still working on navigating between tabs on their computers. So most of the time, I have a group right now, they're getting used to using their phone and doing the Mentimeter question or task on their phone while they've got a laptop. Now we all have different situations. My group just happens to have computer access right now. So the types of questions that you can ask are multiple choice, open-ended, scales. I'm going to show you the first three today. Students can rank. There's a Q&A. Word clouds. This is where you can set it up, and of course, the more that participants say a particular word, the bigger that word gets. You can also post images, and students can write their responses to images, what they see, what they think of an image. You can run it live in your class. You don't have to set it up in any special way. I just have a slide that gives a code, and then I go outside of my slide deck and run it. Students can see the data in real time. And the class can then work with real-time data. So that's something that's kind of fun, that we get some data and then we look at it. For example, if the results are in a pie chart, if I decide results are in a pie chart, we can talk about that actual data and talk about maybe some trends that we're seeing with where the class is or how people are feeling or thinking about certain questions or things. So I'm going to show you some really concrete ways of using Mentimeter that I have been using. In these slides, the right side is going to be what students would see on their phones. And on the left side is actually what the slide would look like that I have up for students. And then I make a connection to the CCRS. So this first one is, we've been working on sentence fragments. And so this is a GED type practice question where they have to find the sentence fragments in context. So we talk about, we read through the sentences. Usually I have them do that silently, because if I read them out loud, I tend to give them verbal hints about where the fragments are without meaning to. So here we have 5 sentences, and then students go into Mentimeter. They go to mentee.com. I give them a code on a slide, and they get in. It was a little bumpy at first, but like today I had a full class and everybody got right on. And then they can choose. In this case, they can choose multiple options. So this is a little language conventions practice, and it's quick formative assessment. I thought that we were doing okay with sentence fragments, but what the whole class realized is they do okay identifying a sentence fragment if it's just like number 1 and a sentence. Is that a sentence fragment or not? But what the class realized very quickly, when these sentences are in context, when they're in a paragraph, they were struggling to find them. So an example of what we had is right here, which sentences are sentence fragments. Now, students can see this as it's happening. So students did pretty well picking sentence 4. We had a couple issues, but we were able to talk about it then, and I was able to say, hey, nobody picked number 1. Everybody recognized sentence 1 as a complete sentence. So they were feeling very good about that. A second way, I have been recently using Mentimeter, and this has been actually really fun. We just did this again today. We're working hard on topic sentences and just writing effective paragraphs. And one of the activities we're doing is I give them details that could appear in a sentence, and they need to determine what the general topic would be, and then create a topic sentence that would be broad enough to cover the sentences, but precise enough to be effective. So this is definitely, we're working on that writing anchor for that, learning how to develop clear and coherent writing of paragraphs right now. The Mentimeter is open-ended, so they can type in their topic sentence. Well, this is what I actually swapped this one out for one we just did today. And I gave them some details that all led to this idea that there are different ways to save money when buying groceries. And so they all had to put their topic sentence in. So here they go. And what's happening is, the first time we did it, they just kind of just threw them up there or whatever. But then they were like, oh my gosh, we can see each other's topic sentences. I said, well, it's anonymous at this point. But all of a sudden they're like, can we get in there and edit? These ones are much improved. This authentic audience, it really does. You hear that teachers will write better for just about anyone but you. And when it comes to like writing for their classmates, they really up their game, and they get to be really, they really start wanting to write as well as they can. So we're going to go through these, and we're going to talk and evaluate each of these topic sentences the next class. But it's a great way to get students, participating in this. The last one is, this is the true formative assessment if you want students reflecting on learning targets. And our learning targets on this particular day had to do with creating complex sentences, punctuating complex sentences, and then again, a lot of work on topic sentences and identifying them as too broad, too narrow, announcing something, or effective. And so what I give students is they can drag these. They put their finger, and this, they can do this on the computer as well, but they choose to do it on their phones. They just have to touch the big dot and they have to drag it. Middle is neutral. You can go 1 to 5. I do 1 to 3. Like, you either completely don't get it, you completely get it, or you're like still not sure. That's enough for my students. So they can actually spend a moment to reflect on where they're at as far as progress towards these learning targets. And here is what you get. And then again, the class gets to see this. You get these averages, and can look at this and go, okay, well, it looks like, the class is doing pretty well on where the commas go. But what do you think about, creating a complex sentence? What questions do you still have? And they'll say, oh, well, I still don't know what a subordinating conjunction is, or whatever. And it's just a great way to make sure that students get an opportunity to reflect. So these are some really concrete ways of using Mentimeter.
Hey, before you move on, Kristine, we had a question about whether you create the content for Mentee or if it's already there.
I create the content for Mentee. It is about as fast as you can imagine to create the content for Mentee. Patsy, you've used Mentimeter as well.
Yeah, it's really quite slick, and it's a matter of just entering the question, choosing kind of what format you want it to take, and it kicks out a code. So yeah, it's pretty easy.
And it's really easy. It's really easy to run. You just go back into Mentimeter.com and my presentations. You go in and there's a big button that says present, and you just click on that when it's ready. You can set it up to 48 hours in advance, and the code will be good for 48 hours. And again, put it on a slide. Like I do with my students, and it's become part of the routine. So we use this almost every single class, either to reflect on learning targets or to do, like today, they had to look at 3 graphs about how parents feel public education is working for students, and they had to choose a statement that interprets the 3 graphs. It's another way to kind of engage and get students interactive.
So just to clarify, I think you're going to try one later on, right?
We are.
Later, so you'll have a chance. A couple of people are asking about whether there's a cost as well.
There is not. You can get a paid version, which gives you a few more templates and a few more options for like colors to display themes and things. But no, I have never paid for it, and I've done what I want. The one issue is that if you wanted to do more than 2 multiple choice questions, you're limited to 2. So I've had to go to other things like Kahoot or quizzes for that. But otherwise, you can put a lot on one slide.
And then I don't know if you can address Mark's question quickly in the chat. Are there two screens you're setting up? Do you want to just clarify? Can you see the chat?
Yes, I can see the chat. What I do is I just have on one screen. That's just the way that things are working with my students right now because they have I'm running 12 students. They all have access to a phone, and so they're in the routine of bringing up the questions on their phone, and then I will run it live and share my screen so that they can see the results as they're happening real time.
Which is the fun part because,
Which is the fun part.
results move around. So great, thank you. More on that in a little bit, but we're going to switch over to Desmos.
Great. Just tell me when to click the slides, or do you want to share your screen?
No, that's okay. I will share my screen, but just not yet. So,
Perfect.
yeah, I'm going to talk a little bit about Desmos, and I'm excited. But I definitely needed to put this disclaimer on the screen that I am not an expert. I am getting my feet wet with this. And I want to share with you some things that I have found, and just some ways to kind of start using it if you choose to, in a non-threatening way. Desmos is my concept of Desmos before I went to Math Institute just a few weeks ago. Thank you. Can you hear me better now or no?
You sound good. Yep.
Oh, okay. But when I went to Math Institute a few weeks ago, we played with Desmos, and I did not realize that there was way more than just a graphing calculator basically available. So here we go. If you want to advance to the next slide, I'm going to we're going to play with it a little bit, and then I'm going to show you how I started creating some slides to use with students and for today. But I just want to let you know and give you a heads up that there is a whole hour session coming up at the Statewide Teaching and Learning at a Distance Conference next Friday from 2 to 3. Andy Albee and Tom Kroger are going to be going through how to create activities in Desmos. And so I'm going to touch on a few points today and show you a few behind the scenes things on how I create some slides, but you'll get way more during that 2 to 3 p.m. session. So I just want to give you a heads up about that. So I am going to give you a website to go to and a code momentarily. And once you join that activity, there's going to be 6 questions that you can kind of go at your own pace. We're going to take no more than 5 minutes to do this, but I want you to kind of get a student experience with it. So just answer the questions, then press next at the top right, and you'll be able to go through 6 questions. And the goal is not to there are some math questions on here, and the goal is not to be right or or figure out all the math, but just to kind of give you examples of question types that you might ask with your students. And some of these prompts are check-in prompts. So some of them you can use. It doesn't have to be a math classroom to use these. So you can just answer, you can say, I don't know, and then you can move on so you can see the different types. So if you go to the next slide, you will then go to, it's student.desmos.com. And so that's the website, student.desmos.com. The code is up there, the 6-letter code. And then just a note that you will then have Zoom open and a browser open. You can stay in the browser until you're done with those 6 questions. So you won't have to go back and forth for today. But you can log in now and let me know if you have questions with the code. I see people coming in on my end. That's awesome. I should have had background music for this part, but that's okay.
It seems to be working well, Lindsay. I'm in there. So.
Awesome. Yeah, I see a lot of people
Yep,
working on
I'm
it.
in here.
Awesome. Yeah, so I'll give you a few minutes to kind of look at those 6 questions. And again, you can always put, I don't know, or whatnot if you want to go to the next screen and see what those different kinds of questions are, but you do have time to try some. Let's take about 1 or 2 more minutes and then we'll, regardless of if you finish, we'll look on the back end of things. All right, so if you would like to, if you finished, awesome. If not, it's okay. I think a lot of people were able to see all of the slides. And I just want to quick show you a few things on the back end with the goal of, not that you'll be an expert by the end of this, but maybe intrigue you to kind of play with it on your own after this webinar. So if you go back to Zoom, I am going to now share my screen. And then you will get to see what the teacher end looks like. So let me know if you're not seeing my screen. You should be seeing like some purple lines. But here at the top, there are 6 different questions that I had you look at. And this first one, it's kind of hard to tell, but there's a yellow outline. So I know I'm on that one and I'm seeing results from everyone. Up here, so 25 people are in this and completing it. Up here, I pressed anonymize. So actually you don't see anybody's names here. It repopulates like with, it renames everyone with like a famous mathematician. So if you wanted to anonymize the feedback so that that you can keep everyone's identity secure and make people feel more comfortable sharing, you can do that. So you could always on your own go back and see how individual students actually responded with the names that they provide, but I kept them anonymous. So here, if I wanted to look at what people, if I wanted to look at a specific comment, students can now see, because I would project this with students. So I would show them now my teacher screen so that they can kind of see, oh, wow, a lot of people are feeling stressed. There's lots going on, too much, work to do. If I want to compare a few of these graphs, it's really hard to see probably on the screen. It's hard for me to see, and it's right here. But there's a little picture of graphs that were shared. So if I were to click this little camera button, snapshot, I can go to the top under snapshots, and now I have two that I just was able to highlight, and now we can talk about someone's graph and see the comment with it, and see, okay, well, what's happening with the curve? Why is it going up and then down? And so this, even though, it may be a math class, it may not be a math class, but that visual literacy of what does that line mean, what is happening, and what could a story be that corresponds with the graph and the movement of the graph, is huge. I think it's a very important skill, regardless of the class. And I think we would all agree. I mean, graphs are all over in the news and everything. So, so this is more of a check-in question, and then I move to some math questions. So I like the one where you can kind of drag, where do I feel comfortable? And I tried this with some of my students yesterday. Like I said, I'm new. And I had them rate themselves on the objective of that day, which was, I feel comfortable identifying key details to match a main idea. I teach everything. And so I ended up using this in my language classroom. Or in my reading and writing classroom. And it was really interesting to see the students who came rate themselves and then explain why they felt that way. And then that's something that you can then also revisit on the other end. Okay, at the end of class, did it change? You can start with it, end with it. Would you move it? Or maybe 2 class periods if you from that start time. Let's take this again. Did things adjust at all? So again, seeing the comments, seeing how different students are rating. Here, seeing the overwhelming response with this group with letter C. But again, no one is being called out for choosing other options. But like Kristine was talking about earlier, real-time data to look at and read a bar graph. Here, being able to use kind of the coordinate plane. I mean, this is, I'm just going to snapshot one. And present it, this, being able to navigate quadrants, but not have to deal with numbers. This can be used in any classroom. And because you're able to kind of edit the questions. Okay, I'm gonna go, we're doing good on time. All right. This one, I love this question. This math question specifically, because it's fun to talk about is this always or sometimes or never true? And there's an even split, it looks like. And so this would foster some really good discussion in class. Okay, why are some people saying always? Why are some people saying sometimes? And kind of pulling out some of that math knowledge. And yes, Vicky, I see your question right away. This won't go away. I can always log back in and see what students have said. So I would probably create a new activity if I wanted to do this again, because then I could go to this activity and we could compare those results. And then estimating is such a good skill, and one of the things I think that holds people back from being able to keep progressing. If you can in math, and if you can estimate, it's a sign that you are, you're able to think about numbers and how big they are, which is huge, and not everyone is comfortable with that. So I could get a summary here and see how many people said 100, 50, 500, and we could talk about these. And I always like to talk too about with estimating, like, well, what do you know is too low and what's too high? And 5 seems too low and 1,000 seems too high. So, kind of giving some framework that way as well. You could bring in some conversations and then look at these graphs and these box plots and talk about that and what all these different points mean. So then we're not going to go through these, but I just wanted to show you that there's things where students can shade in a quarter. There's, writing a fraction, and there is a keyboard that they can click that they can get math symbols. Dragging points to create a line to have a slope of 3 for higher level math. Using this to learn what it means to balance equations. If I try and put in 5 for X, what does that mean Y has to be in order to balance? If I put in 15, does that balance or not? And I can see, wow, okay, Y is heavier, so that isn't going to be an answer. And I could try another one and look, it balances. And so just like that real time, like balancing of equations as well. And then there's interactive graphs. Students, when this is in student mode, they see this, they can write on it and plot points. They can be interacting with graph paper or this dot grid to help draw 3D shapes, or so there's different things that are like some nice tools to use as well that I just wanted to quick mention. But one more thing is about this back end. This is what a teacher would see, but I am going to go back to, give me a second. I want to show you that this is actually not, like, so much work has already been done for you. So if I want to create an activity, if I go, instead of student.desmos.com, all I have to do is go to teacher.desmos.com, and then this will pop up when I create when I create an account. It'll just pop up. And so, Vicki, in answer to your question, these are all the test ones I've done and things that I've created. And here's the one we've been using today. Check-in for my students yesterday. But I just have to go up here to new activity, give it a title. We'll get another test. And then now here is going to be a blank slate for me. And the best part is I don't have to do hardly anything to get started. I don't have to know how to create all these slides. I have now 2 tabs open. I have this one that I just showed you. I just logged into the exact same page. It was, where was it? Here. This is where I was. Okay. So if I am on this exact same page, but I don't want to create my own things, I want to use something else, then I'm going to go to collections. No, I'm not. I'm going to go to home. Home. And then starter screens. This is where I got the one about being stressed out. Screens for checking in. There's all of these are pre-made. Oh, there's another one about how are you feeling today? We can, he's getting more angry or more happy. What's new? Okay, so say I like this one. I just want an open-ended question. Up here, copy. Go back to my activity builder, which is why I have the same website open twice. Control V, boom, it's right here. And so this is also where you can decide to show students their classmates' responses if you want. You can edit the question. And yes, this is free. So, okay, say I want to do another question about where people are. Copy, go back, plus sign, Control V. The right click doesn't work, but Control V does. To copy paste, you can edit it. And then it's as simple as, well, one more, sorry, backing up. There are, with these starter screens too, there are these ones for checking understanding with formative assessment. Where are you at today? What questions do you have about today's lesson? This was the confidence check that I had. And this is what you can edit. So again, copy, go here and paste. And then I could edit what they are rating themselves on. And then I would do publish. And if I do publish, then I can just give a code like I gave to you, just under assign single session code, boom, done. So this is then what I would give my students to do. Student.desmos.com, here's the code, and then they're able to log in. And then you just are in your teacher.desmos.com, and now you see under the ones you've made, you see it, I want to view it, and now I would be able to see as students respond what is happening. No one answered. So that's kind of a lot of information, but it really is like, you don't have to remember it all. I have a few slides. If we go back, I'm going to stop sharing for a moment. And if we go back to the slides, Kristine, I put kind of like a 1, 2, 3, how do I get started playing? Because what I did is I started playing with it, and then I realized, oh my gosh, there are so many pre-made ones, and I only showed 2 things. There are ones on linear functions, inequalities, elementary math. That's where a lot of the fraction things were. But some of those checking for understanding, or the graphic multiple choice options about how stressed you are. Those things could be used in a language classroom, but it's building in visual literacy and being able to interpret a graph. So first thing, to be able to play with this on your own, go to teacher.desmos.com, create an account. How you get to build your own activity is in the custom tab, custom on the left-hand side. And that's where you're going to see the new activity where you create it. And the pre-made screens are under home. So teacher.desmos.com, custom, and home. Those are going to be where you can create a new one with pre-made screens, and then kind of just play around with it and see. But I do recommend having logging into that twice when you're creating an activity, because as soon as I press that copy of one of the activities, I want to easily paste it. I don't want to have to click out and then do this and then do that to go into my activity. I pull up the activity in another tab so that I can just copy, paste, copy, paste, copy, paste. And for me, that's made it a lot easier. So anyways, hopefully that wasn't too confusing.
Couple questions, Linz.
Yes.
One question is there an app for Desmos, or do they have to use the website?
I believe there's an app. I haven't used it with this, but I want to say that yes, there is an app.
I found an app for the calculator, but not for this. But I have a phone that I don't have an iPhone, so it could be something available on other kinds. So if somebody knows, like that's why we're here. Tell us that.
Yeah, and I can look that up while Kristine does the next part too.
Yeah, that sounds great. And then one other question. Oh, just reiterating that everything so far you've showed us is free.
Everything. Yep.
Okay, awesome. And I think those were the questions. Great, thanks.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yes. And so if you go to the next slide, sorry, now that Kristine put that in there, I pulled out a couple different direct connections to CCRS, and I included a speaking and listening because this is fostering discussion. If we're showing students, even if it's 2, right? You're showing a pair of students what each other said. You could still anonymize. Well, I guess that doesn't make sense unless you also did it as well. Then you can't completely tell. But talking about what this information means, or if they're debriefing with you one-on-one. And if you go to the next slide, I put up the shifts and the practices for math. And if you just keep clicking, there's, all the shifts could be incorporated, whether you're zeroing in on checking in on understanding about a specific skill that you're having them master, or creating prompts or finding a prompt on here that helps them make connections between different topics. That's coherence. Bringing in an application problem, or giving them a chance to demonstrate conceptual understanding. And then these math practices, being able to make a plan and solve, and then be able to talk about their strategies, or using math tools and drawings, using what they already know about math to solve problems as a formative assessment. It's nice to use these kinds of screens that and prompts that look different than maybe what we talked about in class, as a way to kind of apply and see, okay, can I use what I already know to then answer this question? So And then I have not created a card sort in Desmos yet, but I would recommend, because Andy Albee and Tom Kroger, who are doing the session next week, next Friday from 2 to 3, and they're focusing on creating, they are what I consider, they're experts in this. And if you can come, I would recommend coming, so to get more answers to those kinds of questions for sure.
Okay, thank you. And then we had Lee, thank you, Lee, looked up on Apple what you can do as far as an app there. So there's some options, it looks like, with Graphing Calculator on an Apple phone.
Awesome.
All right, are we ready for some breakouts?
Yes.
Kristine, do you want to tell us what they're going to be talking about there?
Yeah, I sure will. So we're going to break out into small groups for about 6 minutes. And the question that we have, and I'm going to ask Patsy or Lindsey to post this in the chat box. How can Mentimeter and or Desmos help us keep the ELA math shift central and deepen our standards-based work with learners? I didn't talk about the shifts here as much as I will with Edpuzzle, but certainly you can see how you could do some close reading where students are actually producing evidence to show that they are understanding the concept. So that is in the chat box. How can Mentimeter and or Desmos help us keep the ELA math shifts central and deepen our standards-based work with learners? Patsy is going to put us into groups and check your chat box for the question, and we will see you back here very soon.
Great. All right, I'll put you in those rooms. If you get lost on your way to your breakout, let me know.
People registered for that teaching and learning conference. So
yeah,
I think it's awesome. And I think that, for a lot of people, even in a regular non-pandemic year who have to travel far, it's great. It's going to be so much more convenient.
Yeah, I agree. I'm just putting in the chat box, friends, there's another session. Cindy Secord is on the call today and reminded us that she is doing a session on engaging with purpose, tools for keeping students engaged with online learning. That might be of interest to this group as well. I will invite those of you who've just come back to go ahead and turn your videos off and your mics off just to save on bandwidth for everybody. And I'll turn it back to Lindsey and Kristine.
Yes, so we've talked about this, and I think it's okay to keeps plugging it, but definitely come next Friday. Register for the conference, come next Friday to learn more about Desmos. And I did put it in the chat, but when you were in breakout rooms, I tried logging into that same activity on my phone using the web browser, student.desmos.com, and it actually adjusted very well. So I think students would be able to join that way.
Great. And there's such a good question in the chat. I'm just going to quickly address it before we move on, you guys. So Mayo, great question. So you register for the conference, and then a day or two before or earlier that week, you'll be sent a flyer. And that flyer has the whole agenda, the titles and descriptions of every session, and then a link to join. And so then you'll use that throughout the day. The link that you use that's mailed to you, the link to join is for the first welcome session. And so you'll go to that and then use the flyer for everything subsequently. But yeah, it's pretty straightforward. Once you get that email, it'll all make sense. So you don't need to register for separate sessions. Great question. Thank you.
And if you haven't attended yet one of our multi-session conferences or cohorts that Atlas does, I think you will be pleasantly surprised how smooth the process actually is. We've just got some great tech people behind the scenes who are really supporting us. So so don't let that, if you're thinking, I don't want to be online all the time, it's amazing how quickly you do move through sessions and how smooth everything is. So,
and we promise there will be breaks. Yeah,
there will be breaks, and hopefully you will join us with your pets or children are welcome as well. So I'm going to Edpuzzle. Now, Edpuzzle is funny because some people hate Edpuzzle. And they say, this is what lazy teachers use if they just want to shove something off on students. And I think it's one of those things, again, like if you use it all the time and in place of good teaching, yeah, it's going to not be very useful. I use it really mostly when I have students doing close reading. I want them to do a close read of a video and the audio. And so this is not something that I'm using all the time. I use it asynchronously. I work through Google Classroom, and I will set them up with the link to the Edpuzzle within my particular assignment. Students can also take a link on the computer and use it. If the phones are a little more problematic because they will be prompted to download the app. The app has had mixed response, and I myself don't have it right now because I need a new phone. And if I download another app, I think my phone is going to blow up. So but definitely it works extremely well on the computers. We're actually going to go through and use a very short video to show you how it works. But basically, you can select a video. If you have a video or you find one online or you make your own, you can edit it, crop it, record your own audio over it. You can add quiz questions that students have to answer before they move into other parts of the video. And it's just a way to increase student learning and engagement, again, with a particular video. So these are some of the highlights of Edpuzzle. It's free. It's free. It's easy to get started and use. I went into it. I found a Supreme Court video, and within less than 10 minutes, I figured out how to create multiple choice questions and roll with it. You can see what's trending. You can see what's trending, what teachers are using around the country or in Minnesota if you add your school. YouTube, there are links directly there for YouTube, Khan Academy, TED Talks, much more. If you see the video and there are teardrops, and I'll show you what the teardrops are, that means that someone has added questions or notes and you can edit as you like. There are so many videos that are already done that teachers have already created questions for that you can copy to your own content, that you can change the questions, keep the questions, add to the questions, whatever you want. There's so much already there. Students can rewatch if they need. There's a button for that. The multiple choice questions score immediately. You can prevent students from skipping forward. It integrates with Google Classroom, with Schoology, with Canvas, with other learning management systems. You can set up an open class where students don't have to log in. They'll be asked to just enter a nickname and then they'll go right into the video. You can run it live if you want to. I use it asynchronously. You can use your own videos, and definitely check out the Edpuzzle Help Center. It really is a great help center as far as being so clear about how to do all the things with Edpuzzle. So we are going to do this together. I like to use Edpuzzle sometimes as a warm-up to a topic, like a line of inquiry. And the first line of inquiry we had this year was, how does a growth mindset impact learning? And so we started with this little video. It's very, very short. And what I did was I showed the students the video first all the way through, just so that it would flow. And then I gave them the assignment to go through and answer the questions. And I wanted to get them doing some thinking and writing and trying to make some of these connections. So for example, if I go into this, there are 4 questions, and all looks good, Patsy?
Yeah, looks good. Sorry, couldn't find my mute button.
Can you hear it?
I can.
Oh, that started too soon. Sorry, I had it rigged up for something else. So this is technology. Let me go to this one more time and start it. There we go. I don't know why it's doing that. Here we go. So what happens for the students is they get a prompt that comes up automatically. And this one had, what do you need to grow or to feel successful? So I had them just answer these general questions, and then, well, we'll look through and then I'll tell you what we did. So I'm going to say I need my 3 dogs because I do love them. Submit, they can rewatch, and then can continue. The question comes up, what are some storms that you have to deal with that disrupt your life at times? Yes, the video automatically stops and it waits for the student response. So some storms, stress, students were writing all kinds of things, my kids, my job, no confidence. One student said, I don't have much confidence in my ability. They can submit and you will be able to see. On the open-ended questions, you will need to go back and grade them, and you can go into your count. Okay. So I asked, how does the quote by Rumi relate to having a growth mindset? We had done some work, just a little bit of defining of growth mindset, and students did some responses. I was really touched by a lot of what they responded. They loved the video, and it just got them thinking kind of a little more philosophically. But that's the quote. They do the quote, they can submit that, and then you can see what they did. For short videos, I do run them through one time, or I tell students I put a link to watch it through one time so it doesn't feel super choppy. But this led to this conversation where we then talked about, I said, okay, so I asked you, what are some things you need to be successful or to grow? And they were saying things, and I said, so what in the video kind of mirrors that, the things that you need? And they're like, well, the plant got watered and there was sun, so there's some kind of higher level thinking here as far as looking at some of the analogies, also with the storms. And we talked about, the idea of the plant, coming out of the storm. And we actually, I actually gave them a sentence starter where it said that this video makes me think of, and that was a final thing that they did separate from the video, but their answers were really quite profound, and they enjoyed it. Now, can they see each other's responses? No, they can't see each other's responses. But this also gives students, what I like about this is it gives students a chance to do some thinking beforehand. So when we actually talked about the questions in class, they had already had a chance to respond themselves. So it kind of warmed them up a little bit, and they weren't put on the hot seat right away. They had seen the video, they had already, thought about it. They can do it at their own pace, so they could spend time thinking about each question if they wanted. That just gives you a little sense of it. But I'm going to show you again some concrete ways that I have used it in the last month and a half. My students were very interested in the whole Supreme Court justice process and how a Supreme Court justice gets nominated and what qualifications someone has to have to be a Supreme Court justice. By the way, if you didn't know this, you don't even have to have a college degree to be a Supreme Court justice. And again, short video, and I created questions. Here's an example of one multiple choice question that I asked, which of the following statements is true? Again, are they listening? This happened to be about Truman and how he nominated someone to be a Supreme Court justice who ended up not voting the way that he was hoping the person would vote. But the answer here is there is no guarantee how a nominee will vote as a judge. This is one, every time you see a teardrop, there's a question. one. There are 5 questions here. We did this as a pre-reading activity. Then I moved students into a common lit text called Getting the Supreme Court. And then they went into a Google form where they did some close reading questions and then finally did some writing. But I really like using this for close reading of a visual text or an audio text because it does allow them to stop and think about what they've been reading before they continue on or what they've been hearing. You can also add notes. There's a button you can hit if you're like, we're going to stop here and you want to just make a note that makes it very clear some concept or detail to students that you really want to make. And this next one, I do an activity for adult diploma, and that is where for some speaking and listening, they have to watch a TED Talk and they have to eventually write a short paper analyzing the speaker's message and presentation. Well, it takes a little while to get to that point, and students need guidance when they're watching the TED Talk, and I've used face-to-face some study guides where then they get together and they do different activities, jigsawing with the study guides, etc. But I find that Edpuzzle works really well for something like this, where you really want to get them thinking about why the writer uses certain examples or how the writer is connecting to personal experience or how the writer is communicating a message, but where you want students to stop. And here is an open-ended question. There are already a bunch of made up for this particular TED Talk, The Danger of a Single Story. This is an open-ended question. Why did the speaker's college roommate feel pity for her? How does this pity further the speaker's overall message about the single story? So there's a lot going on here, and it's a good way to guide them in the video so that they're collecting information, they're gathering evidence that they're eventually going to write with. And Patsy did write, and I agree. This is great for students who like to process on their own before chatting and sharing, or language learners who will need a little bit more time to formulate a response. This is something students can do between class meetings or before you meet with a particular student, and then you can spend the time talking about the content. So this is another example. A third example, this is a great little video about understanding independent and dependent clauses. I use this as a warm-up activity because we started talking about clause types. We do a lot of work with clauses because I teach my students how to disassemble a very long, complex sentence into clauses. And I also teach them how to combine clauses and create their own complex, or not just complex sentences, but just like longer sentences. And this introduces kind of the concept of what a clause is, what an independent clause, what a dependent clause. This one I took from another teacher and tweaked it a little bit, but it stops right away. Which of these is a clause? You could also put a note there, if not a multiple choice question. Then right after independent clause, which of these is an independent clause? They need to apply that right away. Which of these is a dependent clause? They also can do an open-ended question. How would you fix this dependent clause? Where they get the dependent clause, and right there they have to stop and they have to add something to create a complete sentence. So again, it's nice for practice. It may not work for every student. Can they pose questions? That I haven't done. And that I would have to look at more. Again, I'm still learning how to use Edpuzzle myself. But introduction and immediate practice of language conventions here, as far as Language Anchor 1, where they have to be able to recognize clauses and start that work of learning sentence types. So these are some concrete examples. Again, it's not an end-all be-all tool. It's not something that I use excessively, but I do use it. It makes a nice warm-up. It makes a nice close reading experience for students if you want them to work with a video that's particularly dense. It slows them down, and my students have enjoyed using it. And I introduced Lindsey to this, and Lindsey went, "Oh my gosh, this is a missing piece." And so I'm going to have Lindsey share with you a little bit about how she's working this into her flipped classroom model.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So I am not sure if they can, if students can pose questions, but the way I've structured some of my math videos, and I'll just show you a few examples. One of my open-ended questions on there is, what questions do you have? And so you could do it that way. Maybe there is another way to do it, but that's what I've started to incorporate. But this is a manageable first step for me in trying to maximize my synchronous time with students. So so I have 2 days a week where we have synchronous time. I'm working with them on, I have reading and writing classes, and then I have math classes, and 2 of each. And so with different levels. So I want to be able to maximize that time. There are then 2 other days of the week where they are completing assignments that kind of reflect what we did the previous day. So that's kind of how we set it up for some independent study and some synchronous time. But I want to be able to maximize that time that I have with them with math conversations. I'm also going to be using this in my reading and writing classes as well. So if you go to the next couple, Kristine's right. Like literally we were talking, and I think this was like last week, and I've already just like dove into this because I was like, oh my gosh, this is what I've been wanting to do, and this is what I need. And so I just want to share with you a little bit of my process. So I am going to share my screen, show you a couple things, and here we go. So this is what, when I log in, I created a free account. This is what it looks like. And these, in my content, these are different videos that I have already looked at and created questions for. A lot of them are math ones. So this is one that I did yesterday. I was not able to be at one of my math classes. And so I was like, oh, I'm going to do this, last minute plan. So I was like, I'm going to give them an assignment that has to do with what we've been talking about. I'm going to have them watch a video, and I didn't want to lose the time. I wanted to, I didn't want there to be too many class periods before we started talking about what we did last week. So I use this to kind of bridge the gap and keep us engaged. So here, I'm not going to make us watch this video. I just want to show some questions. This one is actually, we've been working with one of my classes, we've been working on writing algebraic expressions from word problems. How do I translate this into a math sentence? And so this first one, is actually a note that Kristine was talking about. And I wanted to remind them of something from last week, that we were asking ourselves these 3 main questions when we are analyzing a word problem. And I'm trying to articulate my thoughts when I'm looking at this problem, the things that I see that aren't changing, the thing that I see that is changing, and what that's making me think in my mind. And then, okay, let's see what he says. So this first one is more like an example. And then if I go here, then he gives an answer to the previous question. This is starting a new one. So he says, okay, this is how I would translate it. And I just want to know, what do you think? Right? Like, what are your thoughts on that? What questions do you have about how he wrote this? And so that's what I'm doing the whole time is the very next question is, after he is done reading this, I want them to try the problem now on their own. So I stop the video, ask the question, okay, what do you think? What do you think is staying the same? What is changing? And how would you write an algebraic expression to describe that relationship? And have them try it first, and then see how he solves it, and ask them, okay, what do you think about that? Like, and just kind of have it open-ended. I want students to write more in math, and I want to help them articulate their thoughts more on like why they were thinking something, how they solved it, and trying to pull that out. And so I'm also getting away from using like, what do you, or explain your answer. I want to find one of those. No, maybe I can't right now. Instead of saying explain your answer, I want to say, I tell them now, tell me your thoughts in 1 to 2 sentences, because my students freeze when they see the explain. So it's like, tell me your thoughts in 1 to 2 sentences. So this is an example of, this was a 4-minute, 41-second video. This is an example of how I took that, and this could take them a chunk of time to work through if they're trying the problems and not right away seeing how someone else solved them, but like, how do I stop and help them try it first, then see what someone else did, and then kind of reflect on that. So so that was something that I created for yesterday. But something that I'm doing going forward, which was the missing piece for me, and this looks crazy, and I'm being vulnerable letting you see my planning document for my next unit. But for my other class that's at a lower level, we're going to be talking about the beginnings of algebraic reasoning and introducing letters for the unknown, and just talking about relationships between multiplication and division. And so I found, I have the standards that I already picked out, and I just Googled them and found some videos, and then I didn't know what to do. And then Kristine told me about Edpuzzle, and then she told me that Edpuzzle has Khan Academy. And I'm like, what? I can just search in here for videos, and that's what I'm using. And Khan Academy is good at procedures and kind of explaining the mathy things. It's not incredibly great at fostering conceptual understanding, but I want to, I still need to talk about the mathy things. So I want to use these videos in the assignment days when we're not working synchronously, so that then when we do come together, we can actually just like have that in the back of our minds, and then apply that to some discussion prompts. So one example is talking about multiplication, and the question I have, so he goes through this problem and makes this array, illustrating like repetitive addition and how you could actually just make this array and do 6 times 12, and then you're going to find it. And so asking them a question about it and having them think about it and why that works. Then when we come together, this is what I want to do, where we talk about a problem like this and thinking, okay, how many cookies are going to fit on this tray? And so now I'm bringing in some 3-act math videos. And if you're not familiar with that, you can Google 3-act math, and there's so many different prompts where there's short clips of like a prompt or some like real life math scenario. And then it has you estimate things. How am I going to figure it out? But the beginnings of this is totally, you could totally start to visualize an array of how many across, how many down, can we make this into a multiplication problem? And so I was like, well, this is kind of interesting. We can get into measurements, and can we, do all of these, can we do it using area and introducing that concept of length times width? And we could just have a very rich math discussion. But we kind of I already had them look at why you can just multiply length times width. Like, why does that even work? And start to kind of think about that. So that's one example. Last example, and then I'm done, is this commutative property. Nope, not that. So I found this video. Again, I'm using all these Khan Academy videos that normally it's like, well, they're not great at conceptual understanding, but they have a purpose. And so then I created a couple questions about, why can you do 3 times 4 and 4 times 3? Like, do you think that's always the case, that it doesn't matter the order? Like, getting students to think about that before we come together. And then I found this slow reveal graph, slowrevealgraphs.com. And I can put the links to the 2 things I talked about, 3-act math and slow reveal graphs. I'll put those in the chat. But then this, I'm like, oh, those look like arrays. And these slow reveal graphs, you just project one slide at a time, and you just keep giving them more information. and more information, and keep asking students, what do you think now? What do you think now? And I just feel like we could totally bring in some, oh, how many is that? Well, I don't want to count all these squares. We could totally use, 10 times 4 or 4 times 10, and talk about, okay, it doesn't matter which one I'm multiplying first, but it's like interesting real time, or interesting like real life data. So that's kind of how I'm starting to think about it. And Kristine totally helped me last week when I was able to have a platform to create questions in, to structure these out of class assignments so that when we get to class, we can either talk about questions that they had about the video, but they've already thought about it, or we can then apply that to some other similar but more intriguing prompt and then have a discussion. So that's kind of where I'm at in my planning. And I'm just super excited. So yeah, that's what I have. I'll put those links in the chat. Oh, thank you, Patsy. Putting the links in there.
I'm always happy to be helpful.
Yay. Do you want to share your slides, Kristine?
I sure will. I just want everybody to see my jubilant.
It was very jubilant. Thank you.
That was very, very jubilant, like the old Toyota commercials. Lindsey, did you want to say anything about this slide?
Wow, gosh. Yeah, super important. This is amazing. Okay. If you kept clicking, I just circled some things. I could literally probably circle everything on here with all 3 shifts and all 8 mathematical practices, depending on the videos you choose, depending on how you are setting up your class. They can foster conceptual understanding and in a way that, maybe like with my specific example, the Khan Academy videos, they're not great at conceptual understanding, but they do explain things. There is some conceptual understanding there, but as far as like why things work and how things work, they need a little bit more supplement. But if students are thinking about the math and developing some questions and familiarity before they come to our synchronous time together, we are then able to build on that and create conceptual understanding together, and just kind of maximize our time. We're able to apply the principles with those types of real world problems that I showed. They can try as many times to understand and solve a math problem as they want to. And being able to think about problems in their head first. They don't have to be on the spot because they do have that time before class to be thinking about this, making a plan. How am I going to solve this? When they get to class, they can discuss using what they already know about math to solve problems, using a strategy that they used previously to solve another math problem. Those last 2 that I just read are at the bottom. Those 2 I could see happening with an extending unit. If it's not the first time they're seeing this math problem, so if I'm giving them a video that's kind of more of a review, or if those practices are being developed in our synchronous time because they've already seen how some of those similar problems would be worked out in their asynchronous time. So I feel like you could circle all of these things. But yeah, and I'm also going to put a link to those math practices in the chat because those are actually written in student-friendly language that you could share with students. So, but yeah, go ahead.
We're actually going to stop for a minute.
Deep breath. There's like a lot happening here.
For like a special surprised guest star, possibly.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, and this is without warning, but I'm wondering if Elizabeth Bennett or Cindy Secord, if you're around and willing to come on mic and say a little about how you've used Edpuzzle. It sounds like both of you have used it. I would be delighted to have you say a little more. I know that was like no warning, so if you can't, I get it. But Cindy, go ahead.
I used it many years ago when it first came out, and I used it a lot for history and science.
Okay.
When it was free and you could have as many videos as you wanted. So then when they got better, they added the fee on there. So
as they do, yeah. But you would recommend it?
Yeah, it's really good, and the students really like it.
Okay. We did have a great question in the chat as to what students' response is it? Like, can you say more about how students have responded, Cindy?
I worked with a lot of, well, I suppose we all do, but second language students.
Mhm.
They really don't like to watch videos.
Oh,
I don't
interesting.
know why, but they were really resistant. But this was a good way to overcome that.
So it got a little more engagement for sure.
Yes. Yep.
Okay. And then
I find,
Kristine and Lindsey, yeah, what do you guys?
yeah, I was going to
what's your
say that
response?
I find that students, when they really seem to like it is when we're really digging into something, and instead of always having like, we're going to read from Common Lit, and then here, go to the Google form, and here's 12 text dependent questions, where they're getting some of those text dependent questions while they're going through, especially again, when it comes to video and audio, their listening skills are not, at least my GED diploma students, their listening skills are in some cases less effective than their reading skills even. So to be listening and paying attention, and then to actually have to process while they're listening to a text, that's when they really seem to appreciate it, and when I see more evidence or more details showing up in their writing.
Okay. I wonder if these questions are so great, if we could just have people like just find their chat box and tell us of the ones you were introduced to today. So Edpuzzle, Desmos, Mentee, can you name one you think you might look into and perhaps put into use in your classroom? Everyone, let's just see if we can hear from pretty much everybody. If you find your chat box, you looked at Mentee, you looked at Desmos, you looked at Edpuzzle, what do you think you might use?
And with all the great tools, you pick one or two and you work it into a routine. My mistake at the beginning was implementing way too many tools. Now we're going to do Padlet today. Now we're going to do Edpuzzle. Now we're going to do quizzes. Now we're going to do Flippity. And really just kind of honing in on a couple where students are like, and they can help each other as well. If a student has a question like, I'm not sure what I'm doing, another student will always jump in and say, oh no, this is where you need to go to find this.
Yeah, I agree. And giving myself the permission to only focus on 1 to 2 when we are hearing about so many great things, we want to try and we want to, give our students this great experience, but okay, let's just focus on 1 or 2 and help them feel confident help students feel confident with using it first before others. Before
and
10.
Tip. When you teach them, like when we first used Mentee, I did not use it with content. I didn't put it up with a graph or a chart or something like that. I started out with basically, how are you feeling today? That we started with something so easy so they didn't have to wrestle with content and learning the tool, something they could easily answer and draw from their own experience, so that they could focus on actually working the tool and not so much.
I was reminded of the importance, like just one layer of the onion at a time. If it's new content, don't try a new tool. If it's a new tool, use content, or that's either very minimal or something they're familiar with, for sure. And Vicky, yeah, I appreciate your comment.
Oh, slow. I've been moving so slowly.
Yeah. Well, speaking of trying these out, should we try a Mentee, Kristine?
Yeah, let's try Mentee. Lakshmi, I see. Which few? That's true. Lakshmi, if you want to get in touch with me, I've been around the block now with a lot of these tools and could tell you some things about them. So let's go ahead to the Mentee. So now you're going to experience it. I'm going to get it started here. And go to mentee.com, and you have a special code 859-1978. And Patsy, if you would be so kind to put that in the chat box.
It's there. And of course, you can use another tab or your phone.
You can. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop sharing that. And I am going to, can you see the live Mentee?
I can.
Okay. So you've got 3 points here. Oh,
And I just did it on my phone just to see how it worked, and it was very slick. So it is, that one is an app that you can download and have your students have on their phones too.
Mm-hmm.
And as
When you
people-
hover over, you can also see a little bit of a breakdown as
Mhm.
far as where people are.
I love that it changes in real time. It's fun.
Yeah, and seeing comments come in about this one, Mentee seems easiest, or this one seems easiest. That's definitely where you want to start. Like doing something that feels manageable, like I can do this. And whatever tool you think is best for your students. I don't think there's one right answer.
Right. And I mean, you saw like with my Mentee, for example, somebody made a comment, you knew about the word cloud, but there's just Mentee and the process of going on to Mentee, entering a code. Students are getting used to that. And we do multiple choice questions. We do, we've done ranking. We do the sliding scales. We do the open-ended. It's just them getting used to putting the website in and entering the code. And then it appears very clearly on the phone. So there's lots you can do with that one simple tool.
Mhm. Great, thank you. Well, this bodes well. Looks like people are feeling pretty good about these tools and have something they're going to try. Well, just a handful of announcements before we close here.
Okay, let me.
I'll put a couple things in
Yep.
the chat, and then if you'll share the
And-
slides again, we just want to be sure people know what's coming. There's always something cooking at Shea Atlas. So as we mentioned several times, and I put it in the chat again, the Teaching and Learning at a Distance conference is next week. And then the Support Staff conference is if you are in a role of intake or placement or doing testing or front office of any kind, this is your conference. It's the 12th and 13th of November. You can also find that in the Atlas events calendar. The MEL-Ed conference is not related to Atlas, although lots of people are involved with it. MEL-Ed is the Minnesota English Learner Education Conference. It's the state ESL conference, and it is, of course, virtual, and it is November 20th and 21st. And Atlas is able to sponsor scholarships, although it's not expensive this year, being a virtual conference. I believe it's $50 for registration. It is excellent. It's statewide. It's people who work with from preschool through college level English as a second language, and we are able to sponsor people to go to that. So you will find more information about that on our website at the Atlas events calendar. And then a couple things also to know, there's an Adult Career Pathways webinar coming up December 3rd. If you work with volunteers or are coordinating or want to do more with volunteers, that conference is the 4th. There is a One Room Schoolhouse webinar on the 15th, and we've tentatively set January 7th, Start Your New Off Right, with a math webinar with Lindsey. And then more CCRS support coming up in mid-January. And then, of course, at the end of January, every year we worry about a blizzard. This year we don't have to. It's on. It's not going to be online. Language and Literacy Institute in late January. So things to keep in mind. There's always an event coming up to get to. Kristine and Lindsey, thank you so much for all of your time today and all of your expertise. I'm going to put this link in the chat. Can you explain what's happening with this, Kristine, while I do that?
Yeah, I can explain. I just want to thank everybody. As you can see, we are not fully experts and have our blips, and that's just fine. But we had other ideas originally for the fall, but then when all of this hit and all these online tools became popular, we decided that we would switch out what we were going to do and try to learn and demonstrate some tools that we're using in our instruction. So hopefully that felt responsive. What Patsy is putting into the chat box is a link to an evaluation. And once you complete that, you will get your CEUs. If you cannot do the evaluation right now, we are going to email it out as well, the link, so that you'll have it. But if you could do it, it's just a handful of quick questions while it's fresh in your mind. Please do that. And then otherwise, make sure that you watch out for that email. And questions, definitely to me, to Lindsey. Again, if we don't know it, we will find a super user, or we will find out the answer. Lindsey, anything to say?
Just that this was fun. I think this was one of my most favorite to talk about, but I'm also excited that there are people using these tools and that are more experts than me. And anyway, so now I have some more people that I can ask questions to.
But what I love is that you don't have to be a super user to get started, right? So you
No,
guys modeled
yeah.
that beautifully. Like, I don't know, try it, click around, see what happens. Like, what's the worst that could happen, right? So give it a go. And
Right.
thank
I
you
mean,
for
Patsy
being
observed.
brave.
Patsy observed a class of mine where I did Kahoots, and it was I fell flat on my face with it, and we all laughed about it and moved
You
on.
did so with great grace and efficiency. It was just fine. Yeah, no, it's all good. We're all learning new things here.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
all
and these
right.
are tools that I can definitely see using when we're face to face again, like on the smart board, or having students, giving them some homework or something. I see using these tools in other ways.
Absolutely. I'm going to stop the recording, but we're not going away quite yet. If people have additional questions, feel free to stick around. Thank you. And a big,
Thank
if you
you
can find
so
your
much,
reactions
everyone.
and give some applause to Lindsey and Kristine, you can do that too. If you want to stop sharing, feel free to come on camera and say goodbye if you like.